This is an extract from the Leader Coronavirus Daily podcast by the Evening Standard and hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for it on your podcast provider.
Lockdown has proved make or break for many relationships since COVID-19 forced us all into our homes and to perhaps spend that little bit more time together than usual. So it was heartwarming to see the latest photograph of the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, who, despite residing for the most part in a castle, are in exactly the same boat as the rest of us, cocooning together at home. And that is how Prince Philip will be spending his 99th birthday, with one royal expert claiming he's never spent so much time with the Queen. I'm joined now by the Evening Standard's insider editor, Lucy Pavia. Lucy, they seem to be really happy together after all these years, 72 to be precise. What do you think their secret is?
I mean, in essence, really, what's quite interesting is that they lead fairly separate lives normally, but the Queen obviously was still working pre-lockdown, whereas Philip retired in 2017. I mean, understandably, he was 96. Not many people retire at 96. But he actually day-to-day spends most of his time at a place called Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, which is where the Queen traditionally spends Christmas. But then obviously they'll get together for sort of big family royal events, like Trooping of the Colour, for example. But interestingly, they do lead lives that are quite independent from each other. Perhaps that's the secret.
A little bit of space is basically what you're saying is probably the key to 72 years of happy marriage. I mean, we saw a photograph just last week of the Queen actually out on her pony. I was like, wow, she's 94, she's still riding, and she's still pursuing her own passions. And I think they do have quite sort of, separate interests from one another.
Yes, I mean, this place that Philip spends most of his time at is, it's very, not by national standards, it's a 5-bedroom house, but by royal standards, it's pretty small, it's pretty Spartan. He's never been a man about grandeur or sort of excessive creature comforts. Apparently, it's very sparsely decorated. He spends most of his day-to-day life apparently painting. He loves painting. And he signs his paintings with a Greek P, apparently, which is quite nice. And he also reads lots of history books. So I think they both have their interests and passions like any retired couple, but they do spend a relative amount of time apart from each other as well. But obviously, because it's quite extraordinary for a 94-year-old to be working full time as the Queen is. I mean,
would you be willing to speculate on what they might be getting up to on his 99th birthday together?
Well, I couldn't really say. I mean, perhaps I'm sure there'll be a cake. Perhaps they'll get outside together, although it's a pretty sort of drizzly day. It's quite funny. Obviously it has been described as a cocoon, but Windsor Castle is obviously an enormous castle, so there's sort of plenty to do in the grounds. So I think they'll probably be doing something relatively low key. They're a pretty low key couple, I think, in their private lives.
I mean, obviously, I would have thought he's going to have perhaps a bigger birthday bash next year when he hits the big 100. But it doesn't seem to be that there was anything particularly planned for this year that obviously got cancelled because of the circumstances. So, any ideas how he might sort of celebrate the big one next year?
There'd definitely be a lovely portrait and a letter from his wife. They met each other in 1934 when the Queen was just 8 years old, and I think there's a lot of humour there as well. That brilliant quote that's attributed to him when on the Queen's coronation, when he said, "Where did you get that hat?" which I think sort of sums up the playful aspect of their relationship, definitely, and the cabbage nickname as well.
Search for the Leader Coronavirus Daily on any podcast provider to hear more from the podcast.